Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Freedom of Conversation podcast. My name is Tyler Waltz, and I will be your host. And today we will be talking about VR. That's not the only thing that we will be talking about. This show is primarily focused around just general conversation with anybody that's passionate about what they do. So my first guest will be my closest friend, Jacob Warren. And make sure to tune in. Every week I'll be posting on Wednesdays to get going on any subject that we feel like talking about this week.
Hey, yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I know you had to drive far.
Oh, yeah.
Considering we live in the same house. But I do want to thank you for being my first ever guest. I mean, I can't imagine it being anybody else. So,
absolutely.
Yep, definitely appreciate it. So you're here to talk about VR. And it's something that you're really passionate about. Or something that like is one of your primary hobbies.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know much about the technical side of things. So do you just want to kind of give a brief summary of kind of like where we are or where we've been,
Sure,
with VR?
Yeah, I could do like I could kind of do an overview. We got time.
Yeah, for sure.
So VR has been a concept, like virtual reality being what VR is, has been a concept for a long time. So VR originally was just any sort of environment that mimicked reality in a digital sense.
Right.
So, if you had some program which mimicked something in real life, I don't want to say like real time, but like in kind of an equivalent time span where you change something in real life and it changes it in the digital world, that was considered VR.
So when did the distinction, or like roughly, because there's augmented reality and there's virtual reality.
Right.
And basically the primary thing that distinguishes the two is one of them, it's like your phone and like something appears in the real world through your phone rather than your whole like sight being changed. Like what's the difference there?
That was a split that happened more recently with like the ability for cameras to recognize patterns and everything, right. Especially with like QR codes and everything. That was one of the biggest jumps. But like for the history of VR real quick, so like VR eventually evolved from that point, and it was started to be used in a lot of things early on, surprisingly. I did a paper that I needed to do a lot of research for, and I found a lot of articles about like hospitals that would have this apparatus where they would perform kind of a pseudo surgery on like a false human body.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would either like test your score, or even there was this one device that was built that would mimic the behavior remotely. So they could actually perform the surgery, an actual surgery from like across the country by like...
What do you mean by mimic the behavior? Are you talking about like it's a video game kind of thing where they're practicing?
Right.
Okay.
So like they've got like an actual table that has like a fake body on it.
Okay.
That's like built into like the device and everything. It's all, electronic
for
and
sure.
Like sensors and everything. And they've got like a hooked in pen or scalpel or whatever. And they mimic like a procedure or something. Mm-hmm. And they didn't make it, anything super dangerous. It was just like in the testing stages and everything. We don't even have that today to like a fullest extent.
Right.
But that was just stuff that they were experimenting with, like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Even longer. And so that was like where it started out. And then like since then there's been tons of studies that have been done with different like variations of VR. Like you see the Wii, where people have the Wiimote and from Nintendo, and when they swing the Wiimote, it mimics that action in the digital game. And that it's just...
And that's still technically VR?
That was technically an early version of what VR could be. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And it's just like that immersion was like the early steps. And then finally with like the Oculus and the Vive, early on they had like the Virtual Boy and like some arcade games where you can kind of like experience a
just some
sort
motion
of version.
controls.
Yeah, like that kind of worked with it. But now we can even like have kind of a rudimentary version on our phones and everything. It's just
right, because
so
basically
accessible.
most people started talking about it with like Pokemon Go and stuff.
Oh yeah,
Like
well,
when Pokemon Go exploded, everybody was talking about it like it was basically VR, and that's where most people got the split of like the augmented reality versus virtual reality.
right.
Because now there's cardboard headsets you can buy and plug your phone into that's a VR headset, if that's kind of what you want to call it.
Right. I know Nintendo. Was it the Nintendo Cardboard or Nintendo Labo or something
I think
like
it was
that?
like Labo or something like that.
I don't remember if it was in the Labo or not, but they even had their own like little VR thing for the Switch.
Yeah, yeah. And I heard it was really cool. It was just like a bunch of like mini games and stuff though that like once you played for 15 minutes, it was just kind of done.
I mean, yeah, but
it's
it
a
wasn't
cool
expensive. From
right.
what I saw, it was like $50. So like,
yeah, for
that's
a
not
bunch of
bad
stuff.
for enjoying yourself for a little while. But
Yeah. Also, if anything, it just shows the potential
oh yeah,
because like there's so many places to go. Like think about
VR
it. Even
is just that it's so interesting to look at it because it has gone so far and has so much potential.
yeah. Well, the crazy thing is if you look back to when we were kids. I mean, we're not super old. It's not like we were there when Pong was created, you know. But like our earliest memories when it comes to video games was probably like Super Nintendo, you know, like Super Mario World or like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that. And like thinking back to the earliest like PlayStation, Nintendo games that we were playing, it is insanity. Like,
Staggering.
yeah,
Like,
where we're at right now. It doesn't even feel real sometimes.
it's night and day difference.
Yeah,
and
like
if because going back to those games, especially the ones that we're nostalgic for, we'll still play them and we'll still enjoy the heck out of them, just because it's just what we enjoyed back then.
right.
But like,
If that came out today,
nobody would play it.
yeah,
it
yeah,
it
for a
wouldn't
lot
be
of
able to
things.
hold up.
Yeah, really the
I
only
think
company
Super
that
Mario World would be the only one that would be able to hold up, just because it's Mario and like
right.
people
Well,
love
most
that
Mario
style.
most Mario games, it's the two-dimensional platformer style. So
Right.
if it came out today, people are like, "Oh, it's retro." Like,
That is something a little bit off subject that I find fascinating is the retro style that people make new games with.
oh, I know, I
Because
love
it is, I will say this: the art style is easy to create.
It
That's
is.
one thing that makes it very attractive.
but I love it.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's
I am such a huge fan.
it definitely puts an emphasis on gameplay over graphics,
Correct.
which is a movement that many game companies really need to move towards, that a lot of AAA companies are moving away from. But
Oh, yeah.
that's like a different conversation.
Yeah, right. And most AAA games are basically just cinematics with some buttons in the middle at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
Which I'm not bashing on that because the Telltale games are some of my favorite games.
Yeah.
But I digress. Back to VR.
Right.
So yeah, when it comes to just the gaming industry, period, like virtual reality has been insane.
Right.
And the weird thing is for how much it's like talked about and it's like loved by the people that use it, it's still after like when did you start getting into VR? Like, because you have a Vive, correct?
Correct. And I bought a Vive. Oh man, that would have been like a couple years ago now. But the funny thing about VR is it's still, even with like the advancements and the cheaper versions that have been coming out and everything, it's still
still
almost like a fringe concept in the
Right.
gaming world, in the gaming community, and it's so difficult to sell to a fringe community.
Why do you think that is? I have my ideas on why, but mine's probably coming from a different perspective than you that knows more about the industry.
It's the biggest issue is it's a difficult entry. So one of the easiest ways for people to get involved with VR was with their phones, or I think PSVR would have been the next closest,
Right.
which I've never experienced PSVR, but from my understanding it wasn't like the best experience.
Right. But
And
it
they
was
didn't
on
have like a
console.
ton of apps. Yeah, it was on like the PS4, so it wasn't like it had the strongest backing or anything. It was solid, but it wasn't like, it wasn't the best experience. And then obviously the phones are, severely reduced quality compared to like one of the standalone, or not standalone headsets, but the desktop headsets.
Right. And I mean anything that you can put on a phone, kids are just going to eat up like it's fucking candy.
I mean, yeah, that's true. But
Yeah.
but like the entry for VR, for like an actual immersive VR experience, like with a desktop headset like the Rift or the Oculus or any of the other lesser known headsets and everything that go with it, they just had the Index a little while ago, and Oculus's new Quest 2 come out just recently. And what was it? It was the H2 Reverb or something like that, which is like one of the higher resolutions that has been released so far at like a decent price. But all of these headsets, they require like an expensive computer.
Right.
Not the Quest 2, but like that's like.
Well, we're gonna get into that.
Right.
But we're talking
like,
traditionally. This is what it took to get set up.
The desktop headsets require like a decent computer, which requires like somebody to have a PC gaming rig already that can handle decent graphics.
Right. Well, that's the primary reason I didn't get into it, is because like ever since I was a kid, I always just had a console.
Yeah.
Like whatever console I kind of wanted, I just got something, and then getting anything outside of that was just kind of a pain.
Well, there was a period in time for gaming where computers did not do gaming well, and so it was up to consoles to design their hardware to handle that software better than the computers could.
Right.
But then once computers finally caught up, it was just a competitive market between consoles and PC, and to this day, it's just like a mess with like exclusives and whose hardware is better and at a better price and everything.
The exclusives and stuff like that baffle me.
Well, like there's a reason to everything. I'm not going to claim to be like an expert in like whether or not it should or shouldn't be an exclusive, but
for sure.
the interesting what would be a good way to put it, stir of the recent news was when Microsoft bought Bethesda. ZeniMax Media.
Just happened like 2-3 days ago.
And so people are like, does that mean Fallout and Skyrim are exclusives?
Right. Like, I doubt it.
And if they are, then that's going to be a huge push for Xbox.
Right.
And
it kind of, in my head, because I always try and think of things from like a business perspective, that's a big move. So
that was like a $7 billion deal.
Yeah. Yeah. The joke online was that Todd Howard finally sold Skyrim at like for like the best it could ever be sold at. It's like, try and one up this. But my first question is, how the hell is Sony gonna respond? Because like true. Well, they're gonna have to try and pull some crazy shit out of their back pocket to stay relatively competitive with that.
I heard rumors that they were trying to buy, I believe the parent company is either Bandai or Namco, who owns the other. And that was going to be an issue because they've got a hand in like Nintendo products as well. Oh. And so that would be pulling from that market as well as some from Xbox. And then they were going to make those exclusives. And then they were just going to have an exclusive war.
Man, that would be interesting.
That would be a mess.
When it comes to like the whole console war and stuff like that, that would be a disaster.
Right. Especially unfortunately for me as like a PC gamer, it's just like... Right. I just want there to be PC games. That's all I really want. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is like, it gets to a point where it's difficult to only own one of them, which might be a weird tactic that they're not, discussing. It's like, if we each split all the games 50-50, then they have to have both. Because the clear incentive is to one up the other person. So if you have to buy one, you pick them.
Right. Well, like this is definitely like a Cold War situation where if one of them decides that they don't want to do exclusives anymore, nobody's going to buy it because they have to get the other one to get every game because and obviously why would you pick the one that doesn't have any console exclusives if you miss out on certain games?
Right. And say what you want about the whole digital only versions, but new consoles are getting cheaper. Like it's easier to get new consoles for like the standard individual.
How much was the new PS5? Is like $300 or $400?
I think it was $399 for the virtual only, and then like $599 for the one that you could have discs with.
Which it would. I think it was like $100 more, so $499.
Okay, I got you. Yeah,
$200 for this drive.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me considering how much they're trying to keep people from like borrowing games and stuff like that.
GameStop sweating.
Yeah, no joke. Well, they've been sweating for a while, if we're being honest. I think they're going the way of the Blockbuster.
I mean, as they should for the price they gave me on my returns.
Yeah, you mean like 12 years worth of games for 32 cents in in-store credit?
Yeah.
But back to VR.
Right.
So when you bought your Vive, was it new at the time, or did you get it like an older one? Like how old is like what you've been working with?
So when I purchased my Vive, which was produced by HTC, with help from Valve. The Vive was, I want to say, the better on the market. Unfortunately, shortly after I bought my HTC Vive, the Vive Pro came out.
Nice.
Which was the next generation of the HTC Vive.
Which made what you just bought a lot cheaper.
Right. So the argument at the time was Oculus or Vive, because the Oculus Quest was the cheaper but like more equivalent version of the Vive.
Right, which probably has a higher household name. I think a lot more people would know Oculus over Vive, most
Right,
likely.
absolutely. Well, especially because Oculus is owned by Facebook, so they have their own marketing team working together with them to kind of,
Which,
help with that. Since
Facebook, I'm sure that's great.
We'll talk about that as we go on. But
neither one
that'll
of us
come up
were-
with the Quest 2 with the recent news.
Yeah, neither one of us were super happy about that.
Yeah, but yeah. So when I bought my Vive, that was when it was top of the market, or not top of the market, but top of the mainstream market anyway. And I purchased it, and I already had a gaming computer, and I had lived with my brother at the time, who had an even stronger gaming computer, but mine was still definitely good enough to run the HTC Vive, and I absolutely adored it. I had been, I guess I wouldn't call it obsessed with VR for a while, but I really wanted to try it, and I just didn't have like the means. I didn't have the money at the time to buy a VR headset, and I, didn't have any resources where like I knew somebody that had one or was able to go and like rent one or something like that. And I don't know if they had it back then, but like nowadays they have it where they have kind of like gaming centers where you can go and you can like rent a room that has a VR headset and just play VR games.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it's like a community center thing that some towns have. I've never been to one, but I've heard that they're pretty cool. And I definitely would have gone to one if I knew about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, the funny thing is like, in my head, I've never personally owned a VR. I've always just mooched off you.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I've still not upgraded from the Vive. I've still been using it.
Right. But experiencing, like, for example, I had a PlayStation 1, right? And then eventually I got a PlayStation 2. That level of excitement isn't even close to going to VR. Because, like, when you go from a console to a new generation, you're basically getting, hopefully, a slightly better or moderately better version of what you've already been experiencing. Mm-hmm. But, like, VR, for me at least, and it sounds like to you as well, is like a brand new experience. And shit, like, nowadays, you don't get many of those for like brand new crazy shit that just comes out.
Absolutely.
So like the first time I experienced the Vive, I believe it was Beat Saber that you showed me.
Oh, probably.
And like shit, that's still probably my favorite like VR game of all time.
It's a good introductory game.
Yeah, it's amazing, and just the idea of that even being a reality to like 10-year-old me is mind-boggling that's even a possibility.
I remember when I was probably around 10 years old. I was at there was this arcade that was a part, or even maybe it was just next to like a neighbor to like this mini putt golf course. And I remember they had this pseudo VR setup where it was the cockpit of an airplane with like, you pull it down over your head.
Oh, those were always a blast.
And like it had like triggers on the handles that you pull down, and you just like rotate the whole mechanism, and that's what like turns your person in the cockpit. Right. And I loved it.
Oh yeah.
I played that like the entire time, and I couldn't get enough of it. And I think that might have been like what first seeded my interest in VR, was just like the fact that was a concept.
Right. Well, it's so easy to trick your brain into completely going into another realm.
Oh yeah.
Like the moment that you put that headset on and like you've got the earphones on and you can just see and hear nothing but that experience, you're literally just in a different place, and it's so cool every single time. And like I guess the closest we had to something like Beat Saber back in the day was like Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution, and I'm far too fat for that shit. So this this was really my first introduction to this kind of stuff.
Just stick with Wii Fit.
Yeah.
But no,
so compared to the Vive, which is what you have, where are we now? Because here recently in the news, the Quest 2 came out.
Right.
So where's that at for the most part.
So since the Vive came out, that was basically like pioneer technology at the time. That was the VR is here. There are tons of games for it. Try it out. Everything is like new, and there's tons of indie developers, tons of content, and like none of it is AAA at the time. There's like Bethesda's doing AAA games. Not a lot of other companies are buying in, so it's kind of a rough market for like getting super good quality games, like
Right.
you know, high definition and like longer games and everything.
Well, that
Lately,
was
there's
actually
been a lot of companies that have been developing new games. I guess it wasn't super recent, but Saints and Sinners came out, and
The
that
Walking Dead.
that was an awesome game.
Yeah.
Half-Life Alyx came out. That's incredibly detailed in terms of graphics, and
Right.
that's just such an amazing looking game.
Well, earlier I asked why you thought that it didn't really take off as like most other consoles do, and that right there is the main reason I think that it didn't take off like what most people were expecting.
Well, it's just not worth it for companies to invest in a studio that makes a VR game, because the payout is just not going to be enough to pay for the development.
Right, and even when it comes to like when the Vive and stuff came out, when people buy a PlayStation, they know that they're getting like The Last of Us and like named like series and stuff like that, or Uncharted. They know the reliability of that company and where they've been and what they're most likely going to do.
Right.
People that buy an Xbox are most likely expecting Halo, right? You know, like
Yeah.
there wasn't anything like that with VR. So when people are looking to get something and they see a VR and they just see a bunch of indie games and stuff like that, there's nothing that is like, oh shit, I can't believe they have the new blank.
Right.
So it's a really hard thing to market. Like, hey, do you want to spend what's more money than the console that you know you're going to like the games for just to try this shit out and hope it works? Like, that's a really hard sell for any marketing department.
Absolutely.
Like, you're literally marketing an experience. You're not marketing a product at that point. And that is so hard to do for something that so little people have had any, like, experience with
Right.
up until that point.
Well, luckily, there's a lot of streamers that are kind of showing a lot of positive content on like YouTube and everything, which, I mean, say what you want about any Let's Players or like how you feel about them. They show you what the gameplay is and how enjoyable it can be and everything.
Right.
Ironically, by the way, you were talking about like exclusives and what you can expect from buying a certain thing. I was watching a Let's Play of the Resident Evil 7 VR.
That
Which
would be terrifying.
I found out after I bought the Vive that it was a PlayStation VR exclusive, and that was one of the games that sold me on the Vive.
Nice. That's funny. If I played that game, I would preemptively shit my pants.
Oh man,
Just so
horror in VR is.
it's another level, dude.
If you're a horror fan, you need to experience a horror game in VR.
Oh,
like it is
terrifying.
so different and so like unsettling. Like the whole atmospheric effect.
Well, it's
is
otherworldly.
9,000 times stronger when you're in VR.
Well, yeah, because like if you're sitting down and you're watching a movie, you can be like, "Oh shit, I'm scared," and cover your eyes.
Yeah.
But VR, you just gotta like hope that you don't embarrass yourself if somebody's around.
Well, like my go-to reaction in a horror movie is to like joke with my friends who are watching it with me, or like
Right.
or
No,
just
you're
like
in
distract
hell
myself or
alone.
something. Yeah, no, you got your
Yes.
headphones on.
Yeah.
You got your eyes covered. People could like be about to like jump on you or something like in real life, so you don't even know where people are.
You're just swinging.
It's just yeah.
Right. No, if you've got a flight mechanism in your body, horror VR is not for you.
And like fight or flight.
Yeah, because if you run, you're gonna hit a wall.
Oh yeah, I've seen videos of people doing that.
Oh, it's
hilarious.
scary. Like what was the game that never got released? PT. That was it.
Right. Yeah.
For anybody that doesn't know, just a quick recap. PT was a playable trailer for a video game that was going to come out by Konami, the same people that make Silent Hill.
It was a Konami produced game created by the Hideo Kojima Studios team, who they are the ones who were creating like the Metal Gear Solid games for Konami.
Yeah, and they got into a big hussy about something that was going on. the main guy split from the company, and that's why we ended up with Death Stranding, which is a video game that I loved. But that's a side note.
Right.
So that game, to me, and I think a lot of people that played it, is the definition of fucking terrifying.
Oh, PT?
Yes.
Yeah.
And somebody, I don't know who, a brave soul.
Yeah, I think it was a community project.
Right. Well, put that into VR. And like, for anybody that is listening right now, you need to go watch gameplay of that. Because if you're a horror fan, at least.
PT specifically. I don't think there's a lot of gameplay of the VR version.
No, but even just watching and seeing that and then imagining what it is in VR.
And put headphones on, because like the sound is definitely a very important aspect.
Oh, it is the definition of just atmosphere horror.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
I remember the first time I tried to show it to you, you were drunk and you're like, I can't handle this right now.
I was losing my mind.
It's just so unsettling. But horror games in VR, there's been a few that are just kind of like cheesy indie games that like they didn't really spend a lot of time.
Well, a lot of VR
or like
games,
porting it or something. The horror aspect is definitely so much more palpable in VR games. Like, it's just in like video games, like on Xbox or PC or whatever, when you're playing a horror game, it's just kind of superficial.
Well, you know that there's
they jump scared me or something like that.
Right. Well, you know that there's a disconnect.
Exactly.
You're sitting on the couch, you're looking at a screen, you're holding a controller, and you're playing a game.
Yeah.
In VR, you're literally in the room.
Yeah.
Like, you are walking down that hallway, you're about to get your ass
the
reamed.
darkness is enveloping you.
Right.
Like, it's not just the screen.
No, it's nothing but sweaty palms and puckered assholes the entire way down the hallway. It's just the shit sucks. Right?
Oh yeah. I still struggle with VR horror games. Like, I love the concept completely, and I keep having like my friends and family play them, but I still can't get through them on my own.
That's great.
Oh, but we were talking about like where it's come
right
from, like where it was.
Yeah. So the Quest 2, which I believe you are getting.
Yeah, I bought a couple of them. I'm buying one as a gift for somebody who will remain unnamed because it's a gift. It's a surprise gift.
Yeah.
And but I'm going splitsies with someone else with that, so it's not like I'm paying full price for both of them.
Sure.
But I'm buying one for myself, and the main reason, just to inform people that may not be informed on that, the Quest 2 is the second generation that Oculus created for their standalone headsets, and by standalone I mean it doesn't need a computer to run.
But it's better with a computer.
Right. Well, so that's like this thing that they created where it runs some apps that are designed to be kind of like minimalized in terms of difficult content to render, like high resolutions and stuff like that have been kind of removed. Then the Quest 2 came out, or just released their information recently, and it's supposed to be like twice as strong as its predecessor.
So what do you mean strong when it comes to like processing, graphics?
Exactly
like, what
that. So they don't have a dedicated graphics card built in, obviously, because it's such a, it's just a headset.
Right.
But their processor is built by Qualcomm, and this is, not a layman part of the conversation, but it's basically a specially designed processor for headsets that is like generations beyond what their original processor was for the original Quest, which was like, by the way, the Quest was sold at $400 and ran pretty well for like what it was, and people were like, wow, this is pretty cheap and it's pretty good for the price.
So what's the time span between the Quest 1 and now? Like, how many years of development are we talking?
The Quest 1 came out like a year and a half ago. Like,
really?
It was not that long ago.
So they're moving pretty quick on this.
Yeah, it was not very long ago at all. And then the Quest 2 just got announced like a week ago, and they dropped the price to $300 for the base model, $400 for the one that had 4 times the storage capacity if you wanted to download multiple apps.
Which that's not that big of a deal if we're being honest.
I mean, I went with the base model just because we have decent internet, and I figured if we download a game, it's just, we could keep our base games on there.
Right.
But anyway, and a lot of our games will be on my computer anyway. But anyway, the Quest 2 has I think it's called the XR2 processor, which is a specialized version of one of their Snapdragon processors, one of Qualcomm's Snapdragon processors that's specialized for headset VR. And those processors specifically have built-in integrated like graphics capabilities, which, I mean, it's not like to say that it is as good as a desktop computer, obviously, but it is starting to there was an article recently that I was reading where somebody claimed, at least, I didn't follow up completely, they claimed that the new setup is nearly or already surpassing the minimum spec requirements for the Oculus Rift, the original Oculus Rift.
Okay.
So like the games that were running on the Oculus Rift would be playable on the standalone headset without plugging it into the computer and everything if it was ported correctly.
So I don't know the technical side of things. So what exactly is the difference? Because like the headset is just the headset. Right. So what benefits do you gain from plugging it into the computer? How does that make a difference?
So the headset itself, like everything's built in. You can use your phone to like control what apps are playing or like setting it up and everything if you don't want to do it through the headset. But it uses all built-in technology if it's standalone. That way you could take it wherever you want. You could take it to...
you want to play it on the bus stop.
Right, yeah. You want to play it wherever. It doesn't matter.
You want to take it to work.
You just scan the ground and like the environment, and you got your play space.
You got your VR power poops. Just whatever you want.
It's just wherever you want. Yeah. And speaking of playing it, like if you're busy doing something else, they were integrating some new technology to create like a virtual office, and so you could like have your desktop remoted into like from your Oculus, or even create like your own local desktop and be working on work in like a 8-screen display or something like that virtually with your headset on. And
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and
that sounds like some Tony Stark shit.
Logitech was coming out with a keyboard that would track with the Oculus Quest 2 so that you could have that and it would show up in your VR reality so that you could type on it and you would be able to like see your hands even in VR and then like type on the keyboard so you wouldn't have like a disconnect of trying to type.
That is insane. That sounds so cool.
No, it's definitely very cool. And so you were asking what the difference was between plugging it in and everything. So when you plug it in, it's called a tether. And when you plug it into the computer, it uses the computer's built-in capabilities like the graphics card and the processor and everything to basically do all the grunt work of running the game before it sends the visual data to your display in your headset. And then all the components like, the built-in power, the CPU, all that stuff just kind of stands by, just waiting for whenever you unplug it. Gotcha. And so it can't run the same games standalone as it does when it is tethered. That's just a disconnect that comes because there's just a difference in processing quality.
Gotcha.
And
so essentially plugging it in just gives it more capabilities overall.
Right. And you also get access to any apps and stuff that you have on your computer. Like, for instance, Steam isn't something that's in the standalone Oculus Quest 2 because they have their own marketplace. And so...
Got to have that exclusivity.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would say that's more on Oculus's side than the Vive, because the Vive... I mean, you can... I guess that's kind of both ways on that side, because you have to download third-party software to be able to play Oculus apps with a Vive. But anyway, if you tether it, then that opens it up to basically any app that you can run through VR on your computer. And so that's, Steam games, that's Rift S games, which Rift S is the second generation Rift model that Oculus came out with. And it's just like all of those games become available and they run at the speed of your computer rather than the speed of your headset, which lets you get better graphics if you've got a decent computer.
Right, which I'm assuming most people that are into this kind of thing probably have. You
say that, but it used to be that you had to buy a $1,000 computer and a $600 headset or VR setup, but now you can buy a $300 standalone headset. That's right. All you have to buy.
No, that's very true, especially people that are wanting to get into it now.
Oh yeah, this is an excellent time to enter into the market.
Right. Well, one thing that I was reading about, which it's technically not about like the technology of VR, but more of the business aspect of it,
Oh yeah,
is that it's so difficult. Like, it's such an industry that the people that are into it absolutely adore it, but it's so hard when it comes to getting funding and stuff because it's not a huge profit. Like, it doesn't make a lot of profit.
yeah. It's like, well, the biggest issue is that there's not a lot of, I guess seasoned veterans in VR because it's such a new technology
Right.
that like studios are up and coming with VR technology and VR studios and everything, but there's not like you can't toss a project to a studio that's experienced in standard game development and expect them to port it to VR easily
Right.
and do it in a way that's not going to cost them tons of money in research and development in order to get it to be VR. And then you got to wonder how many people are even going to buy that.
Right. Well, one thing that I think more recently that's been helping is the fact that stuff like Resident Evil 7 was put in VR. You can get like Skyrim in VR. You can get Fallout in VR.
Yeah.
I just heard about some kind of new deal with PSVR where they're putting like Minecraft in VR. So like the more established titles that you can get into VR, the more mass appeal that it's going to have.
I think Bethesda was one of the, like, and for all that Bethesda has done recently with like 76 and everything, I'm not going to say that they're the best company out there, but they definitely helped push that VR market a substantial step forward with them porting all of their games, which, let's all be objective here and say that they weren't the best ports to come out on the market, but you playing VR Fallout and VR Skyrim and VR Doom,
it's a blast.
It is a blast, and no matter how like clunky the port was, it is still so much fun. I played so many hours of Fallout VR just because it's such a different experience. It's so much fun.
Oh yeah, it's great. And obviously you just got to give credit where credit's due. Like you don't have to agree with everything that a company's done to let them know when they've done something right.
Yeah.
So I can definitely appreciate that they've taken steps towards that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now with like Microsoft owning Bethesda, what's going to go down that road,
Oh, they haven't come out with a new front runner game since Fallout 4, which is
what do you mean front runner game?
Well, like their front runners are the Fallout series,
right?
And
which
then
the most recent one would have been
Elder
76.
I guess that's true. I wouldn't really consider that part of the saga.
I think they do.
Man, to me, that was more like a side game. Like how Elder Scrolls had Elder Scrolls Online.
Right.
I would consider that basically in the same category.
I got you. Right.
But I would say that I'm waiting on their next big single player game.
Right.
Or even if they decide to do like a co-op. I mean, like, I don't think they would, but like I'm saying, like that sort of style of game.
For sure.
And then the same thing for I think they even announced the name for the next Elder Scrolls game, but I can't remember what it was called.
Right.
If they did announce it, I might be imagining that. And then they have a new IP coming out that apparently is an old IP, but they're bringing it up for like a new massive RPG game. It's like Star something. But anyway, I didn't play the old game or get into the old version of whatever that was, but I am super interested in what they're going to make out of this new one.
For sure.
But yeah, the Quest 2, back to the Quest 2. So that was something that I was at work, and my boss, I work in 3D development for my university's library, and my boss is super into VR, and he was like, so we're having a launch party for the Quest 2. Do you want in? And I'm like, okay, so hold on. Quest 2's coming out, and there's a launch. I'm in.
Sorry. The fact that you and your coworkers are having a launch party for virtual reality, you guys are fucking nerds.
It wasn't my idea. I was absolutely down because it was on the clock. But no, I was excited to find out because like the Quest was already such a success.
Right.
Like,
And I'm throwing shade, but I'd be there too.
yeah, it was kind of an impromptu thing. It was just us kind of like watching the live stream that they called it like the Facebook Connect or whatever. I know it's kind of a weird name to use, but they had like all the new specs and features and everything. Which, by the way, the information about the Oculus 2 or Quest 2 leaked like a week beforehand.
Oh.
Because Walmart posted it for sale like really early, and so people were able to just get the information from that, and then they pulled it. But I guess not all the information, because a lot of new information came out with the stream. But yeah, so like I found out day of, and I was part of the team that was refreshing the webpage after I found out it was only $299. I was like, I am in.
Nice.
And yeah, so like it was an interesting experience. But I am looking forward to getting the Quest 2 just simply because I have not gotten anything since the Vive.
Right.
And the Quest 2 should be anyway, an overall upgrade from the HTC Vive original, which they don't even sell anymore. But it's got a higher resolution screen, and one thing that the Vive had was like a style of lenses that created what's called the screen door effect, which is kind of like a blurry / like it. As a kid, we've all kind of held our face close to like a screen door and tried to look through it from close up.
Okay.
Or it's kind of like,
or when you're super excited for the food in the microwave.
Yeah, exactly. And so like you only see through like kind of a crosshatched pattern of like black lines.
Right.
Which, I mean, obviously is more noticeable when you're looking through a microwave or like a screen, but in VR you can almost tell that like that is definitely there with the pixel arrangement and how it's magnified to your eyes through like the lenses.
See, you mentioned that, but like I don't know if it's because I never really looked for it, but I don't really notice or don't remember any times where I've pointed that out. So is it something that if you're paying attention to it, you're probably going to notice it a lot more?
Maybe. So I definitely notice it sometimes. It's typically when like the screen turns to a solid color for whatever reason. That's when I'll definitely notice it. I think it was either solid blacks or solid whites. I would see that kind of pop up. But in the end, it's not a huge immersion breaking thing, but it is something that's just definitely improvement on the immersion when it's not there. So I through work I was able to try the Rift S, which uses a different screen technology and like a different lens setup and everything. And I was kind of blown away by the difference that like between the Vive and the Rift S, how clear the screen was compared to the Rift, or not the Rift, the Vive. And I was just like, I kind of wish I bought the Rift S just because like how that was. But
no loyalty.
Yeah. Well, like that's one thing that's interesting about this market with VR is that it's kind of competitive, but at the same time, especially with Oculus going to the standalone market where they're not continuing the Rift, I don't think. They're just going for like minimization instead of like just as much technology as they can do.
Well, honestly, that's probably the right move.
It's definitely the right move because they're going to reach like the markets that people are like hesitating to buy in because it's so expensive, and they're going to hit all those people. And then we've got Valve with their new Index. And I don't know if HTC is going to continue their line after Valve split from them. But
so when it comes to competition with VR, I think if you walk up to just somebody on the street that's about our age and you say, hey, what VR do you know? They're going to say the Oculus. I genuinely don't know if me personally I would know anything about or even know what the Vive is without you owning one. Are there any other companies that are involved other than those two? Like,
there's a handful. I can't remember what it was called. There was like the standalone project that was kickstarted where somebody
That's
made
normally not a great
they made
thing.
like a 12K resolution headset that had like all the way around like 180 degrees screen that like went all the way around your head, and it was just like a ridiculous to run
That already
headset.
sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, it was just something that was like a more of a proof of concept than it was even like a feasible thing to run.
I got you. But it's really just Vive and Oculus for the most part then.
Right, they're the front runners. They're like Xbox and PlayStation.
I got you.
Well, I guess Nintendo squeezes its way in there, but like,
Right.
but yeah. So those are like the two front runners that absolutely dominate the market. You've got the Reverb, which just recently came out, and they came out with the 2, I think is what they called it, but I don't think they had a special name for it. But I think that was for like $599, and that was higher quality than the Vive Pro and the Rift S. So that was like,
And this was
that's
third party.
right.
Okay.
The HP Reverb, I think, is what it was, and the surprising thing about that was that they just came out of left field. Like, people were like, okay, this is happening, I guess. They've got a new high resolution, high fidelity headset that beats the previous competitors. And
Did they do well?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they actually might have sold out of their initial run,
Oh, that's good.
which,
I
to
figured
be
that'd
honest,
be a hard
VR
sell.
headsets typically do. It's a
Yeah.
weird thing to say with the VR market being so fringe, but they typically sell out of their product very quickly.
Yeah. Well, I just figured, so like in my head, everybody knows what a car is, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a brand new, like top quality, like we're going to be the new competitor in like sports cars or something, you're probably going to have a decent amount of like car collectors and stuff get that for the namesake.
Yeah.
But VR, with it already being a relatively niche market, I just couldn't imagine this new high quality person just kind of stepping in and doing well, you know? Because like it's hard enough for Oculus and Vive to do well with like some of their profits with how niche the market is already.
Right. So that is definitely a difficult thing for them to do, just because it's such like a fringe technology on top of it being like a fringe market, is that like people that are in development for other technologies aren't really in the same department as the people that are in VR.
Right.
You know, people developing smartphones might, just because, you know, motion tracking and like moving the screen and everything, they would probably be a little bit more flexible towards that direction. But beyond that, there's not really a lot of, you know, modifiable departments to create like a VR department.
Right. Well, just as an example, like you just said that the Quest 2 is now what you said, $399?
It's $299 for the base model.
But if we weren't roommates or you didn't have VR, I still wouldn't to this day own one and don't really have an incentive to get one, just because I feel like I wouldn't like get the bang for my buck, I guess. I haven't been playing as many video games recently as I have in the past, but like I still personally don't see an incentive as much as I absolutely love playing the VR.
Right.
You know, so it's I feel like it's a hard sell for anybody that would consider themselves like a casual gamer.
Well, that was the appeal of the Quest 2. With like the new generation consoles coming out, that is something that people are struggling to commit to, is that it's $300. How much are they going to get out of it? Is it worth it? And
Yeah, 'cause
then
you
you've
gotta
also
buy
got
games on
these
top of
new
that.
consoles that are coming out, and I think they're like $400 each.
Yeah.
And it's just like, am I going to get an Oculus Quest 2 and hope I get my money's worth? Or am I going to get these consoles and know I get my money's worth because I
Right.
bought the previous console?
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
just,
on top
that's
of
a
that,
difficult...
It's not like you're getting the Quest and you just have a bunch of games. You
Right.
know that
You
you're
gotta
getting
buy 'em all.
$300. Yeah. And then you have to buy games that aren't really name
Yeah.
significant games. So you're gambling on your game purchases rather than knowing that you're going to love the next Call of Duty or Halo or whatever mainstream game that you've been eating up for the past decade that you know you're going to enjoy the next time around.
Right. Well, before I forget, I'm going to point out that if anybody is planning on getting VR, the 3 top games that you should get, if you like Call of Duty, get Pavlov VR. That's a requirement. If you like kind of fantasy swordplay games, get Blade and Sorcery.
I love that one.
Oh yeah. Also, if you have anger issues, get that game.
Yeah, no shit.
And if you like music, or even if you like music but don't necessarily like beat games like Guitar Hero and stuff, or if you do like Guitar Hero, even better, Beat Saber. And especially Beat Saber is good on its own. It's not like revolutionary on its own, but the ability, once you mod it, to create to add like custom songs and everything.
Oh, the modding community is wonderful.
That makes it like 70 to 80% better.
Yeah.
And that's just an incredible game.
Right.
But those are absolutely things, if you're trying out VR, you need to try those 3 games if they fit your preferences at all.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of the technology side of things and like where we're going with gaming. I'm super interested in like its application outside of the gaming industry. So when about a week and a half ago we discussed what we're going to talk about on this episode, I started looking at like other applications, and I found a huge portion of VR, even going back to like the early 90s, of how it can be used in the medical field, which we touched with at the beginning.
Right.
But specifically for stuff like therapy. Do you know anything about that? Because I've done like a little bit of research throughout the week on that because it just fascinated me.
So in the same report that I was referencing earlier, I had found a few articles that were talking about patients with like Down syndrome or other forms of developmental disabilities that were in these studies that showed, I guess with all these papers, you can never say that it helps. You have to say that the data suggests that it could help.
Right. But neither one of us are doctors or scientists, so it fucking helped.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
so the papers would have like a randomized study of these patients, and they would, have 30 of them go through the normal treatment, 30 of them go through like an alternative treatment that's shown to be better, and then 30 of them go through like this virtual experience and have it go through that treatment to see like if maybe they could have like a even better experience through virtual reality. And the evidence showed that sort of treatment was like a lot better.
Yeah.
And it was just so much more applicable for these patients. And it's just, and there's been that.
Is this them focusing on like developing their cognitive ability?
Right. And like it just helps because like they simulate things and treatments and everything to kind of like help them understand, basic concepts. But in the end, they're limited by physical reality for that purpose. But in virtual reality, they can be, they can make it whatever they want to like simulate it. And
in that same vein, when I was looking, there was a really cool like cognitive test that they were doing with people with like mental disabilities, to where they would set them up in a real world environment. So they would be on their own. Mm-hmm. They would basically have somebody that is reassuring that they're there with them, just not in the game, and they would test how they cross the street. So they would literally put them in real world events that seem obviously like mundane to you and me, mm-hmm. but with somebody that has diminished like capabilities, that's a huge thing for them. So they could literally have cars going across the street and see how they react, monitor their eye movement to make sure that if they were on their own in reality, if they would be able to put together that they're in a dangerous situation and check both ways across the street, or if they were home, if they could cook basic meals through VR. And it was literally teaching people that are mentally disabled how to live without the real world threats to see how they would do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. Like that is something that I feel like anybody can get behind to help people just passively with these kinds of treatments, because that's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like you're literally taking the danger out of like real world things that people with those problems need to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's a really beautiful thing when you look at it. Like that could help so many people if that became a mainstream therapy.
Oh yeah. There was this training program that I helped, I guess, operate for students that were a part of it for like a nursing home that basically, it wasn't, I guess, for the nursing home. It was for a class about nursing elderly patients.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know much about it at the beginning, but I was kind of given the rundown of how to operate it for people. And then I was able to watch them go through it and see what they were seeing. And it was very interesting. It basically let you take the place of an elderly person with Alzheimer's / a little bit of dementia, I think.
Hold on. Sorry, just so I'm clear. This is like somebody our age being put in the shoes of that
of
type
the
of
elderly person. So
okay.
basically,
That
it was a
terrifying.
sit down VR experience. It wasn't something that you could go around and interact with a lot of things. Or
That sounds like
that.
a horror game.
It was not far from it. So interesting. That interesting way to put it.
Well, that just sounds scary to
oh
me.
yeah,
Like
absolutely. It was watching it. I was just like that. That just oh man.
It just sounds intense.
It is. So basically, it would start out and it's just a lot of like, you're watching your family around you and they're kind of interacting with you, intermittently. Things are kind of normal, but then things progress as your condition worsens. And it starts to get to the point where like midway through, you're like, wait a second, what did they just say? Because they started the conversation by saying like, hey, grandma. And then it was just like, and it just babbles because that's what happens. It's like, it just doesn't register to them. And it's just, and like people are incoherent. They don't understand what's going on. Like things are happening that you don't understand why they're happening.
I mean,
or
shit,
how
that
they're
sounds like
happening.
me at the end of the week, but
that
that sounds terrifying.
Things just get, and it's just, it doesn't get better. That's the most unfortunate thing is that like there are good days, but it doesn't, it's like a degenerative disease. And
that sounds like something that would just kind of, I guess shell shocked isn't the right word, but it's one of those like reality, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's basically like a brash realization of just raw reality. You know? Like, this shit happens.
A reality
like,
check.
Yeah, like you're so ignorant to like what a lot of people deal with, right? Mm-hmm. And that is just an absolute kick in the dick.
Oh, that's one of those
reality.
things that like it's a super dark concept to think about, but it's one of those things that we all like to forget.
Right.
Is
like it's important
possibly our impending doom,
Right.
It's like,
yeah. I mean, it's literally just like a reminder that you're mortal.
Yeah.
Which, like, that for some people is too much. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a very scary thought.
There are people that change their entire lives when they realize that they are mortal. When they, like, come close to death and they realize they could die any day. And so they just completely 180 their lives.
Right. And I couldn't imagine going through a VR experience like that.
Watching them go through it, I was just like, I don't want to do that. That looks really bad.
Right. Like, when I get into VR, I'm like, I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to cut some music notes, and I'm going to make a fool of myself dancing like a motherfucker to this song.
I'm going to pretend to be John Wick.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I'm not thinking, like, oh, man, this is sure great how I'm dying.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
It's very rough.
I'm
the
having
whole experience.
so much fun.
It even included things where, like, you were like accidentally hurting yourself and your family was struggling with the concept of whether to put you in a home or not.
Jesus.
And like they would be like, I don't want to put you in a home, grandma. And then she's just like, I'm already home. And like, it was just like, oh man, I don't want to go through this conversation before I have to.
Not cool.
And yeah, it's very rough.
Oof, that is terrible. Now, on the reverse end of that, I also, at the same time that I was reading about the helping people with cognitive issues, in the same like domain as that, they were actually helping people with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So basically, I saw, and I don't remember, I believe this was like the late 2000s. They were putting elderly people with Alzheimer's through a museum. So they would control the whole thing. All the person that had the headset on had to do was look around. And the museum was uploaded photos and videos of them in the past. So it would literally just be a museum of their life.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and like they noticed, I believe, I don't know if this is perfect. So somebody might have to, if you're listening, don't necessarily take my word for it. You might want to look up the number. But I believe it was somewhere between like a 16 and 24% improvement over the course of like 3 to 4 months of this treatment on their like just overall memory of who they were, because they were being reminded literally every step of their life up to basically when the treatment started with photos.
Wow.
And I thought that was pretty cool too. And then they would change it up. So apparently a big thing with Alzheimer's is your brain gets into such a routine that it can't remember anything outside of the routine, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So they would change the museum. Like all the pictures and stuff would stay the same, but instead of walking through a museum, it was like a different building every time. Or one time it was like a railroad that you were sitting on. It was like a train with pictures coming by. So it was like conditioning them to see outside of the routine. And it was just a really cool thing that I read. That was in the same thing as like helping people with the mental disabilities.
Right.
Have you seen any of the studies on like memorization with VR?
No. Has there been a lot for that?
So there hasn't been a ton, but I noticed that in most of what I was researching and doing this, it's a classic game where there's like 10 cards sitting on a table. Right, and then you flip one over and it's like the ace of hearts, right? And you flip over another one, it's the ace of spades. You flip them back over and you basically are trying to match cards. You're trying to find both aces of hearts, both aces of spades, and then whenever you get a match, you pull them out, right?
Right.
It's like just old school game. They noticed that people that were playing the game routinely in VR were getting results somewhere between like 9 to 15% better, because when you're looking at a flat surface or like playing it on a game in a flat screen, there's a level, it's that same level of disconnect that we were talking about with horror. You forget things because you're not as focused, where if it's in like a 3D plane where it feels real, or if I'm dealing the cards to you, you have more of a tactile feeling for the situation and your brain picks up on routines better.
Oh, yeah.
So they noticed that people that were practicing certain things and going through certain like memorization games and stuff like that were having much better or much easier times memorizing information that they experienced in VR, just simply because of the tactile feeling of it.
That is interesting.
So like they were having like students and stuff study for tests in like VR library kind of situations, where instead of like reading a book, they just had like articles and stuff like up, like they were computer screens around them to read at and scroll through and pick through and stuff like that.
That's really cool.
Which it sounds dope as hell.
Yeah.
Like I probably would have had higher than a C- in all my classes if I could do that shit. It would actually made studying fun.
There were actually classes that were involving themselves with the VR department at the library the last couple semesters where I worked, and that's been something that's kind of making a little bit of headway, is the concept of using virtual reality for learning and like teaching as just a supplemental tool at first, but maybe even like further later, just because it's...
So how would it be supplemental in a university sense? Because basically my understanding is it was a bunch of preloaded information that they wanted them to already memorize. Would they just have to do that on a class basis?
So the concept of... just to give like a basic rundown of what this program was, just to kind of picture it, the one that I helped with anyway was kind of like a Roman history, and they would, I think it was Roman history. I didn't actually participate in the creation of the program. I just kind of like helped them set it up, and then they did their thing. But they would set up like their own little museum section that had like busts of the I don't know if it was just great people or if it's specifically like emperors of Rome or something like that, and they would have like plaques that they would describe what they did, and they would create those themselves and we would just import them into the game, and then they could set up their own little display, and then they would present that, because it was a museum style class. I think it was either Roman history or a museum or something, like a combination of the two of them. I can't remember for sure.
Something to do with history.
Yeah.
Right. Although it is funny that it's a museum concept, which is essentially what they were doing with like the Alzheimer's people.
Right. And it's a great, like virtual museums that's going to be a huge thing coming up. I'm working on a virtual museum in my job right now. That's kind of I guess it's not so much a museum as it is kind of a virtual experience for a museum.
Right.
But
Now,
there's like, I want to say like 4 or 5 other projects that are going on right now that are for museums. But the class concept goes further than just like a supplemental, like you can do an assignment in VR sort of situation.
mm-hmm.
If you had a classroom where everybody had a VR headset on, it wouldn't be a situation of people getting distracted by certain things, or even being in a case where they can't see very well because they're too far towards the back or anything like that.
Right.
They could walk straight up to the whiteboard and just stare at it from a foot away to
Right.
be able to like read the teacher's handwriting and everything. And that, that's a completely different experience. That could be
sounds really
so
cool.
much more beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, what was the thing that they worked on with VR before VR became like very popular? It was like 360 movies or something like that.
Oh yeah, with like YouTube where they were doing their like
right. So that was a brief concept that didn't really go anywhere. I don't know if it's just because it wasn't popular enough to keep going, but I always thought that was pretty cool too.
Right.
Because you could literally take a camera anywhere and you can experience the world from a VR headset that way in a weird roundabout way. It's not like you're there feeling the breeze at the beach or whatever, but if you're doing some kind of report on a location, shit, you just click on Google Maps and then you can see the whole area, and if you're in VR, you can basically walk around, which is a cool concept. I absolutely love the idea of using virtual reality for more than video games. Video games are fun, don't get me wrong, but
and
the
that's
practical...
what's going to sell the market.
Exactly. Like, for example, what we talked about at the beginning when it comes to like the medical studies and stuff like that. If you can set up a VR training process for complicated surgeries, you're going to sell your shit to hospitals everywhere because they're going to save money.
So it's funny that you mentioned the medical VR, like, I guess, situation. I guess we did already talk about like the medical applications and everything, but there is one other
briefly.
thing that I wanted to bring up. They had this program, and we're working on another one now even. They had a program, I'm trying to remember what it was called, but basically it let you explore the, I guess, processes of the human body to an extent. There was like, I think 8 demos or something like that, where you would go through like, the blood vessels and like see the different, parts that were involved with that. And then you would go into a cell and like you were in like a little shrunk ship or whatever that was traveling through it, and you could like
the
see
magic
everything
school
moving.
bus.
Exactly. It was a magical school bus experience
with Miss Frizzle.
And it was just like incredibly immersive to be like, I guess immersive is a weird way to put it, but you see like a picture in the textbook, or you see like a little TV clip where they kind of try and show what it would be like in there, but it's not really like, you don't have a very good imagination of scale of what is going on and everything. But in the VR version of it,
you're looking and you're like, oh, that's the nucleus, or that's the this, or
like I was
that's the mitochondria, the
there were a
powerhouse
couple
of the cell.
biology majors that were in there that wanted, they were like, well, we're in biology and we have an exam coming up, and we're wondering if there's any programs just out of curiosity that could like just make it fun to study, because we need to study a lot. And I was like, well, we got a couple medical programs, you could try them out. And they were like, oh man, this is the like cytoplasm or whatever, I don't know the words.
Right.
I'm not a bio major, but they were like, oh, look at this, and they would rattle off some 18-syllable term for it, and he's like, whoa, cool. It was just hilarious to hear them talking about it. And yeah, it was very interesting. And like that was a free product that they weren't even selling. Is like, I think it was called like the Body VRs. I can't remember for sure. Yeah. But it was just such a cool experience, and they were just like so into it. And then like on top of that, they had the ability to kind of examine the human body in terms of the skeletal and muscular systems, and even like pick them apart and like hold the individual parts and like examine them up close and arrange them however they wanted. And it was a great tool.
Yeah. To me, like, I love gaming. Like, you and I both throughout our whole life have played video games. But I am so much more fascinated with the other stuff that VR can be used for. One of the things that it's one of those things that like pulls at your heartstrings a bit. They're using VR to distract children that have like major medical issues that experience a lot of pain. So I saw a thing where there was a child that had, I believe, 60% of their body in like third degree burns. So they were doing like skin grafts and stuff, which is excruciatingly painful. And they would hook them up into like a VR thing and have them like go on roller coasters and stuff while they did it, and they were experiencing like 35% less pain. Wow. because of how distracted they were.
That's incredible.
And oh yeah, it's amazing. Like it's such a beautiful thing to hear, because like anytime that it helps people, it's really worth what you're looking into. Like we can sit here and joke around about how fun it is to cut music blocks and stuff like that, but if there's practical application to like genuinely help people, it's worth it, you know. One last thing that I was looking at that I thought was awesome was PTSD treatment.
Oh yeah.
So there's a program that's going on right now where soldiers are explaining what they're going back to, like what is hung up on them, and they talk to their therapist that specializes in this kind of thing, and they recreate the situation as close as they can, and they run them through it in VR, and as it's happening, the therapist is talking them through the stuff that they actually experienced in a like real-time format.
Wow. And
it was insanity. Like the video that I saw, it was him. He was literally like in like a Humvee. What, like he's in there. There's other people in the car, and like he was really hung up on the car in front of him getting hit with like an IED. So like he's going through, and like he's not strapped to the chair, but he's like belted in, because obviously he's going through a PTSD moment.
Right.
So like he's gonna react, and the therapist is just talking him through it, and he's like slowing down and speeding up the situation. And he had this huge panel that like controlled the weather and stuff like that. So the guy was like, I remember around this time XYZ was happening in the distance, and the guy would type in some stuff and some things would happen, and like he would pause it at certain times. He's like, this is about to happen, you're about to experience this again, are you ready? And it was just this crazy thing of him just reliving that moment until he finally came to terms with like some crazy shit. And like it's just baffling that this is where we're at now.
Like, oh yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an incredibly effective tool for so many different things.
Yeah.
And it's just right now, just because of the whole fringe market thing, it's slow, but once it finally becomes a mainstream tool, it is going to completely revolutionize everything that we do in terms of technology.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is like, think about where, I'm trying to think, when was the first time that you really heard that VR was going to be like sold for the public?
That was with the Oculus Rift.
It was like 2015, 2016?
I want to say,
is that about right?
It might have been even earlier. It was just a rumor.
Oh, okay.
People were like, oh, the new Oculus company is making a headset, and it's going to be like affordable to people. And I was like, okay, let's slow our roll. Let's see how that goes.
Right.
And then Facebook bought it, and I was like, so some big company just purchased this technology, and now they're developing it instead of like some, studio out in the middle of Silicon Valley that may or may not just cash out and then bail.
For sure.
But now it's like a full project. Yeah. So we'll see what they do with that. And it was years later that they finally came out with the final product.
I really hope that Facebook does well.
Right.
Like, does this right. I don't want to say does well as in like they make a bunch of money, because I mean, fuck, it's Facebook. Like, let's be real. But I really hope that they don't just do this as like some pet project, and they actually give it an honest try.
Yeah.
Because like, no offense to Facebook, neither one of us are huge fans.
Yeah.
But like, there's so many ways you can mess this up.
Absolutely. And they've already taken a step in a direction that a lot of people are very upset about. They now require that you link a Facebook account if you are operating a Quest. Like if you try and sign up for an account, you can no longer make a Quest account. You have to make a Facebook account and link it.
See, that seems ridiculous because you and I both, I don't want to say we're anti-social media, but we try and avoid it as much as we can.
Right, yeah.
Like, essentially the only forms of social media that we have are in the form of, like, business to a certain degree. Like, I'm obviously going to have, like, a Twitter or something for this podcast and stuff like that, but neither one of us have personal social media.
Right. I've tried to avoid it as much as possible. That way I can make my mistakes in private.
Correct. Well, I'm actually going to have an episode entirely about social media, so I'll definitely talk more about that at that point. But this is just a weird way how it's segmenting into our conversation now.
Yeah.
Because that would be a deterrent for me, because I don't want to create a Facebook just so I can play a fucking video game.
Yeah, I created a fake Facebook. I'm trying to remember, what was the name that I created?
You might not want to admit it's fake. If the Zuck hears this, he might delete you.
Right, but I'm sure there's plenty of people named the same thing. I think his name was Jack Mehoff or something like that.
Yep. Nice. Classic.
I think I tried to add somebody. Well, I can't remember what their name was, but
right. Oh, I completely forgot. I meant to segue on. You brought up that they were doing like virtual lectures, which is essentially what we're doing now with Zoom and shit.
Well, they haven't really begun virtual lectures a lot.
But it's an idea.
Yeah, that is something that people have been structuring and like proposing, but that's just because, you know, how many students are going to have VR?
Right.
They're not going to be able to do that.
For sure. So the funny thing is something that is more in my realm, because I'm out of school and I wasn't in like technology when it comes to school. I went to school for accounting, which is, most of my professors were like, I don't even know why we need a computer. I got a calculator right here and I got a pencil and a pad of paper. So it was just awful when it comes to technology. But in the world that I personally love, stand-up comedy, they have already, since the whole like COVID thing, have done VR stand-up performances.
Oh, wow.
Where you buy a virtual ticket for a seat in a virtual theater and see a stand-up performance. It didn't do well.
Yeah, that would be a little bit of a...
Well, it's a hard sell.
Yeah.
Because how many people that want to see a specific stand-up comedian has a VR set to tune in with?
Right.
Now, what they did, which helped, is if you didn't have a VR set, your camera angle that you would be watching on your laptop was just from the seat that you bought.
Yeah.
Which you could like zoom in, zoom out, and stuff like that, which that filled it. Plus, I can't remember who the stand-up comedian was. I wish I did, because it's a cool idea. Is a really big advocate for VR and a big video game enthusiast. So this was like something that he was trying to do, which is super cool. But I love the idea of VR like concerts and stuff. Like it's a cool concept.
It's just so, oh man.
It's a hard sell.
The biggest issues that I see with that is that there's so much that is both ways for a concert and a stand-up, where like the stand-up relies on the
it's the experience,
the laughter and like the crowd's reactions to how they tell jokes, and like the hecklers and stuff, even, you know, like the interactions with the crowd, being able to look at them and be like, hey, this guy over here, or something like that.
Well, the great thing and the negative at the same time for the stand-up experience is what was happening is everybody, what he thought was going to go down is that everybody's mic would be on, so when he said a joke, they would laugh. And then you would get that tactile response, which is what every stand-up show needs.
Exactly.
But mics aren't the same as real life laughter. It was basically just a wave of like every time people laughed, and you couldn't distinguish anything, and like his voice would come out, but if people were laughing, that's just a bunch of interference overlapping. So it didn't really work out how they were hoping, but I like the like initiative for it, you know, especially because I mean, as much as I would love to sit here and be like, oh, I'm a stand-up comedian, I've only ever done open mics because everything got shut down once I got started on it. But I do consider personally myself an amateur comedian that's trying to get started. And like I absolutely loved it. And with everything that's going on in the world, if this is the route that things have to go, I love that the trade is trying in some way, shape, or form to develop with the world.
Yeah.
So it's a cool alternative to have. But with that being said, I will take a room full of people 10 times out of 10 over VR.
Oh, yeah.
Or like a virtual show. Like we went to go see a comedian here recently in the past few months at a drive-in. They did a show at a drive-in theater, which was a great idea. Like that was so cool. Like shit on it all you want because everybody's in their cars, but that's some creative shit.
Yeah, that was
Bert
Kreischer.
Yeah, Bert Kreischer. Like I don't know if you'll hear this. It would be amazing if you did, but love your stand-up.
Yeah,
we
ended
saw
up
you
in the front row.
Yeah, we were in the very front row when you came through and loved it. Thought it was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I just love how the industry kind of finds a way in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So when it comes to audience and stuff, like VR helping that in some degree as well is really cool.
Oh yeah.
Are there any other subjects that you want to talk about?
Well, you brought up the AR subject.
Oh, augmented reality.
Yeah. So
I don't know if that's a separate topic or if that's supplementary.
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about it to get super into it, but I do want to define the distinction just to make sure that I tie up that point. So that was something that I wasn't super knowledgeable about for a little while, but basically augmented reality separates from virtual reality in the way that you experience it specifically. So in virtual reality, you fully immerse as much as you can yourself into this, application, whatever you're running. And that is a completely separate reality from, what is actually around you. In augmented reality, you're using something like, the Google glasses or, you've got your phones, which have tons of augmented reality applications, especially with like Instagram and Snapchat and everything having their filters. Those are considered augmented reality. And so basically what it is you have a stream of content that is the world around you, and then it just adds content to it to kind of like augment what you see with like extra, whether it's like a visual or like information or even like a voiceover if you look at a certain thing in like a museum. And so initially that was kind of a fringe concept, but with like QR codes and like the camera being able to recognize patterns and then create something when it recognizes that, it started to become a more realistic technology quite a bit ago. Yeah. And one of the things that I was seeing was like, it was pretty interesting. They would have a card, like a playing card with a QR code on it, and then they would set that on the table. And then when the camera saw that card on the table, it would pop up like a house. And so they could put like a virtual card game, or like not, I guess a virtual, but like an augmented reality card game where like you could have like 3D pop up.
All right, just to show our age a little bit, could you imagine if we had that shit when we were into Yu-Gi-Oh cards?
Oh man, that would be insane.
That would blow my mind.
Have it built into the dual disc.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be incredible.
Man, I haven't thought about that in a long time. But the
augmented reality thing's cool. I think everybody has heard of like Pokemon Go.
Right.
That was when I feel like it just blew up. Like augmented reality was everything.
So that was a weird thing with Pokemon Go because that was kind of a pseudo concept of augmented reality. It took your Pokemon that you were looking at and it just kind of threw it in like behind your camera, and it just kind of hoped that it was good.
Right.
I remember I was at work at a restaurant and I was capturing my first Squirtle, and I just kind of was like, all right, where's it at? And it was like inside the like soda vending machine. I was like, all right, I'll roll with it. And I caught it.
But that is definitely, if I was going to say anything made it mainstream.
Yeah.
Like
I think actually, and this is because neither of us are very heavy into social media, Snapchat and Instagram with their filters that like, you can change like the blush on your face,
Yeah, you
or
can
like
actually
add
look pretty.
background and like, change your hair, like all these different things that you can do that dynamically change what you look like or
Right.
what's going on
Yeah,
with
makeup,
like
hair,
with
give yourself a
actual
fat
things.
ass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's more Photoshop. But actually, there might be an augmented reality for that. I'm not 100% sure. But the thing that like distinguishes it is that it's like in real time. You're looking at the camera image or whatever, and it's changing what you see into like the augmented reality.
Right.
And that was just with like all the filters that came out. I remember I was on the phone with, I was just playing on the phone with my sister, and we were like looking at these ones that would just like swap our faces. That was like an early version of it.
Right.
And that was just so funny to do, and like swap faces with people. And it was just, that was like, oh man, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then that just blew up, exploded. And now you've got all these filters, like incredible numbers of them, and like super difficult to do filters, like things that it puts hair on your head, and like you swing your head and it swings the hair, like
Right.
incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just that's only going to get better as well. It's going to be I guess like a partner market to VR in a way, with
Right.
kind of similar technologies coming out. But I'm super excited for that as well. I
Yeah.
know that they're still, I think Facebook announced that they were going to try and create some sort of augmented reality glasses, and they showed like a prototype of them. Like they're very thick. I will say that, like the frames that hold all that tech are very, very thick.
Right.
But it's interesting to think that they might be prototyping something, especially if they've made the Quest so affordable, and if it is, because it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
It's shipping in mid-October. If that does end up being, super high quality for super cheap price, maybe they'll make AR glasses finally something that's feasible.
Right. Well, I don't know. I'm far less interested in augmented reality than I am in virtual reality personally. Okay. But that's mostly because I've never really looked into augmented reality.
Yeah.
The only thing
it
that
honestly
I've
kind of snuck into the world.
Yeah. But my biggest thing that I've always thought was cool is just, and it's the classic like Star Trek or whatever, where you have glasses and you look at a painting and you're like, starship whatever, send me all the information we have about this image. So
Right.
like you can go and you can see something and look at a building or whatever and find out that it was built in like 1842 and the designer was this and they use these materials. That's the kind of stuff that I think would be really cool, because that's the kind of stuff that we do with our phones already. We already look at something, we open up our phone and we Google it. So if we can just look at something and then just get the information, that just sounds really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's mostly the kind of stuff with that I'm excited about.
I know they showed something like they were trying to get it to react to things like snaps as like a thing, or like making a certain hand gesture to be able to like get it to recognize that you want to activate it.
That could be bad.
Like,
You
ask a
accidentally
question.
throw up a gang sign.
Exactly.
Just trying to Google something
like,
and you get
do it.
shot. It's like, oh, damn. I was just trying to find out what's in this pudding.
Yeah. But like that way it's just like not always on. But it's a very interesting field that like I personally haven't researched to the full extent of, but the world's changing, man.
Right. Well, both of
gonna be
these
crazy.
subjects have unlimited potential that I'm sure us talking about right now, we can't even imagine the shit that's being cooked up right now.
Oh yeah, 10 years from now, it's going to be a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
And it's insane. But that's just going to be the reality of it.
Right.
And oh man, I can't wait.
No, I can't either. And like, I'm not a tech person, so I mostly hear about these things like through something else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like in the know, but it's always super exciting. Like, I'm always stoked for anything within this. And now that I know the medical applications and stuff as well, I'm even more excited.
Oh yeah.
Because not only are we improving like hobbies and gaming and stuff like that, but we're also genuinely helping people's lives as well to a certain degree every time it gets better. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Do you have any other subjects you want to bring up?
I think I'm good for now.
Right on. Well, thank you, everybody. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. I'll be doing episodes every Wednesday, new subject every single week. We'll be talking about coding next week with a friend of mine, David, who's a professor. We'll just do something every single week. I'll be doing like short clips and stuff like that of like segments of stuff that we talked about as well. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe if you like what you hear.
Smash that. You gotta absolutely annihilate that like button.
Right, yeah, I'm not doing that level of pandering. But if you're doing audio only, I really appreciate you listening. You can follow me on Twitter. It's Tyler with F.O.C. for Freedom of Conversation. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you like what you hear. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.